Mark, a dog owner, took his canine companion for a peaceful stroll near the lake one sunny afternoon. But when his dog suddenly bolted toward the water, dragging him in with astonishing strength, Mark's heart pounded with terror. As he gasped for breath in the chilly water, he saw something that sent shivers down his spine. Trembling, he fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 as he stared at the water, unable to believe what lay beneath the surface. Nobody wanted to believe what Mark had discovered in the water. Not even the police at first. It all made so little sense, and Mark could not blame them. If Kyla had not put him on the right track, he probably would have never found this and never believed anybody who claimed they did. Eventually, he was able to convince the police, and when he showed the officers the evidence of his find, they were stunned. They immediately called for backup, and even a detective team was put into action. They needed to get to the bottom of this quickly. In all of this madness, Mark almost forgot about his dog Kyle, the one who put all of this in motion. They could never be thankful enough to the animal. But what drew Kyla to the lake? What did Mark find in it, and why did he have to call the police? Mark had his German shepherd Kyla for almost 5 years now, and he never had any trouble with her. He adopted her as a puppy, and she was very well trained. He always felt extremely confident when walking or doing anything else with her, which is why the animal's behavior that day caught him off guard so much. The pair was going to a local park for their afternoon stroll. They had been here many times before, and it was always one of Kyla's favourite locations. But they had not been here for a while, seeing as Mark had a tight schedule. When the dog realised where they were going, she could barely contain her excitement. It always put a smile on Mark's face to see his companion like this. But he also knew that he might be in for a bit of a challenge today. When Kyla was this excited, she would often pull on the leash, and with her strength, it could make her somewhat hard to contain. But Mark had always been able to manage so far. But to Mark's surprise, Kyla was actually fairly calm when she was let out of the car. She was mostly working hard with her nose. She constantly had her head down and was sniffing like her life depended on it. This was not too uncommon for German shepherds, and Mark had seen Kyla doing it before. But never to this extent. He started to wonder what she could be looking for. Were they maybe animals around? But even if they were, this had never before triggered Kyla to this extent. She was always relatively calm around other creatures. So maybe there was something else going on. So he might have allowed Kyla too much freedom. When the dog started to follow her nose off the path, Mark allowed it and followed Kyla. He wanted to see what the dog's nose would lead him to. He did feel like the longer they were walking off the path, the more Kyla started to pull on the leash. So to make sure she would not escape, he tied the rope around his wrist. A big mistake. To Mark's surprise, Kyla's nose actually led them to a small pond in the park. Mark had not seen this before, and by the look of things, not many people came here on a regular basis. The leaves on the ground were pretty much undisturbed, and there was no trash to be found anywhere. But there was still something here that was drawing Kyla's attention. The dog was sniffing the ground and was clearly trying to find the scent again. 10 minutes passed, and Mark was starting to lose his patience. She was still curious about what the dog was trying to find, but at this point, it was not really worth his time. It was his first day off in 2 months, and he didn't want to spend only at the park. But then, something happened. In a matter of seconds, Kyla's ears perked up and she lifted her head. Her gaze was firmly directed towards the pond. She then jolted towards it and jumped in the water. Mark did not expect this at all, and before he knew it, he was pulled into the water by the dog. He could not even comprehend what happened at first. The water was ice cold, and Mark had no control over what was happening to him. The strong animal was pulling him further and further into the water, and he had a hard time gasping for air. The lake was much deeper than he could have predicted, and there was no place his feet could push him. And then it went from bad to worse. Suddenly, he was no longer being pulled along the surface of the water. Mark started to be pulled down and had not a single breath of air. Mark started to panic and felt his life flash before his eyes. He needed to act quickly if he wanted to get out of this alive, and in a moment of clarity, he started trying to get the leash off his arm. It was not easy as he had tied in a strong knot, and because Kyla was still pulling on the rope, it also made the knot even tighter. Mark already felt like he was starting to black out due to the lack of oxygen and the cold. But then he finally managed to get his hand untied, and with his last bit of life, he swam to the surface. What was happening to Kyla was the furthest thing from his mind at that moment. All he could think of right now was making it out alive. When he finally got his head out of the water again, Mark took a very deep breath and then started to swim to the shore. He was still having a hard time dealing with the cold, and he needed to get out of the water as soon as possible. With maximum effort, Mark finally managed to get back to shore. He was gasping for air and had to try and compose himself on his hands and knees for a moment. He still could not really comprehend what had just happened. Everything had just gone so fast. But then it suddenly hit him. Where the hell was Kyla? Mark quickly turned back to the lake. His eyes were scanning every inch of it. The last thing he knew was that Kyla had dove down, which caused him to almost drown. But it was not like she would have air forever. No matter how long he looked, he couldn't see his dog anywhere. There were not even air bubbles coming to the surface or something. Mark's mind was going at 1,000,000 miles per minute. Had Kyla maybe already made it out of the water already? He had not been out for that long. He should still have seen some evidence of her getting out of the water. But there was nothing, like she had disappeared into thin air. Or maybe she had not gotten out of the water at all. Clutching the soggy edge of the pond, Mark's thoughts raced wildly. How could I have been so careless? He lamented, his voice shaking with anguish. Every moment he had spent training and caring for Kyla flashed before his eyes, now shadowed by regret. A disturbing thought tugged at him. If she had drowned, wouldn't her body have surfaced by now? Maybe she's trapped under something, he wondered aloud, his heart heavy with dread. With trembling hands, Mark pulled out his phone, scrolling rapidly through his contacts. He dialed number after number, his voice cracking as he relayed the day's horrifying events. Please come, he begged, hoping someone would have answers or, at the very least, offer solace. Cars began pulling up to the park's entrance, doors slamming hurriedly. Friends, family, and even distant acquaintances approached Mark, their faces etched with concern. They all formed a makeshift assembly, united in their mission to find Kyla. We need to comb every inch of this area, Mark asserted, his tone shifting from desperation to determination. Some will search the water's edge, others will fan out through the park. We have to find any sign of Kyla. Hopeful gazes met his, everyone ready to jump into action. Mark knew the pond better than anyone, having spent countless weekends exploring its depths. I've got to do this, he thought, steeling himself. While he wasn't a professional, his amateur diving skills might give him an edge in finding Kyla. Without wasting a second, his wife dashed off in their car. She called the nearest diving shop, her voice a mixture of anxiety and urgency. Every minute counts, she whispered to herself, pressing the accelerator harder, racing against time to get the needed equipment. Someone had the brilliant idea to use social media to mobilize more searchers. They shared Kyla's pictures, her leash color, and her last known location. Have you seen her? Became the echoing question as park goers were approached by frantic friends. As Mark geared up for the dive, adjusting his mask and checking his oxygen, he could hear distant voices calling out Kyla's name. Like a coordinated army, groups scattered in every direction, the park resonated with hope and determination. A couple of hours felt like an eternity. Slowly, searchers began reconvening, their expressions somber. Mark surfaced, breathless and disoriented, only to hear the words he'd been dreading. We haven't found her. No one's seen Kyla. Mark steadied himself on the lake's edge. With every beat of his heart reverberating in his ears, he filled his lungs with air and plunged downward. The cold water embraced him, but his sole focus was on scouring the murky depths for any sign of Kyla. It was a world of muted colours and diffused light. Oddly, there were no fish or plant life to be seen, which added to the lake's strangeness. The haunting silence of the water weighed heavily on Mark, deepening the pit in his stomach. As he descended further, the lake revealed its unexpected vastness. In the dim light, Mark realised that the lake was deeper and more intricate than he'd ever imagined. With numerous pockets and unexplored crevices, the challenge ahead grew exponentially. Mark's flashlight danced over rocks, casting elongated shadows. Every dark corner, every hidden spot was a potential hiding place. His determination fueled him, even as his oxygen dwindled. He held on to the belief that he'd find some trace of Kyla if he just kept going. Hours seemed to pass, and yet the lake was unusually barren. No footprints or watermarks, no signs of struggle, nothing that indicated Kyla's presence. A chill ran down his spine as an unsettling realization set in. The lake was empty. But how and why? Mark's flashlight beam catches the gleam of metal. Pushing through the thick water, he identifies peculiar man-made shapes resting on the lake bed. These were not naturally occurring forms, they seemed purposefully hidden in this watery abyss. With each kick, the ominous shapes became clearer. He could feel his heart hammering against his chest. The silhouette of large rectangular structures loomed ahead, incongruous with the serene lake environment. His flashlight reveals rows upon rows of large sealed shipping crates. The enormity of his find dawns on Mark. This was no mere accident. The crates bore signs of age and intentional concealment. A sinking feeling overwhelmed him. The crates potentially held answers, but they also indicated danger. The presence of such objects in a seemingly serene lake implied malevolent intentions. Mark knew he needed to get this information to the surface immediately. Breaking through the water's surface, gasping for breath, Mark's voice cut through the air, filled with panic. "Call the police, now!" he yelled to his wife. Those on the shore looked on in shock, grappling with the weight of his revelation. Holding her breath, Mark's wife quickly dials 911. "We need officers at the park," she demands, her voice trembling but insistent. "My husband found something submerged in the lake. Please hurry." There was an intensity in her tone that conveyed the gravity of their discovery. Mark, with renewed determination, dives deep again. Navigating between the crates, each second feels like an eternity. The haunting shapes of the submerged boxes now had a new significance. Somewhere within this underwater maze, he hoped Kyla was safe. A muffled sound. Mark turns his light towards a particular crate and sees movement. Inside, Kyla is pressed against a transparent barrier, a pocket of air keeping her alive. Their eyes meet, relief visible in both. She'd found refuge within the crate, escaping the lake's suffocating grip. Bursting forth from the water, Mark pulls Kyla to safety. Their ragged breaths harmonize, echoing their shared ordeal. The shore erupts in cheers as onlookers witness their miraculous emergence from the treacherous waters below. A collective sigh of relief sweeps through the crowd. Friends and strangers alike rush forward, surrounding Mark and Kyla in a circle of shared jubilation. Their ordeal had not only drawn them closer, but had bound everyone present in a shared moment of triumph and gratitude. While the jubilant atmosphere permeates, whispers spread among the crowd. "Why were those crates there? What's inside?" Mark's expression, as he looked back at the water, mirrored the growing curiosity. The initial joy at Kyla's rescue was now tinged with an underlying sense of unease. Sirens pierced the calm, and the red and blue lights danced on the water's surface. The police descended upon the scene, their grim expressions in stark contrast to the previously elated mood. "We got a call about some submerged crates?" one officer inquired, approaching Mark and Kyla. Mark, still wet from his dive, hands over his waterproof camera. "See for yourselves," he prompts. The gathered officers huddle around the playback, and the footage reveals a haunting underwater world, culminating with the revelation of the crates and their chilling contents. As the last frame fades, a heavy silence hangs over the group. The officers exchange grim looks, their faces pale. "These aren't just any crates," one murmurs. "They're filled with weapons." The gravity of their find dawns on everyone present, overshadowing the earlier joy. Kyla's innocent exploration had inadvertently led her to the heart of a concealed operation. The park, with its tranquil ponds and chirping birds, held secrets that belied its peaceful facade, suggesting a lurking danger that no one had previously imagined. The hum of police activity intensifies around the lake. The park, previously a sanctuary for families and couples, transforms into a crime scene. Tapes cordon off areas, and forensic teams begin their meticulous work, understanding the vast implications of the submerged cache. "Over there," Mark gestures, pinpointing the exact location of his dive. He explains every nuance of his underwater experience, emphasizing the crate's peculiar positioning and the air bubble that saved Kyla. His recount serves as invaluable guidance to the dive teams preparing to retrieve the crates. News vans line the perimeter, antennas high, capturing every unfolding moment. Journalists swarm Mark and Kyla, their story resonating with a captivated audience. Interviews, photo ops and stories paint them as the brave souls who inadvertently uncovered a potential underworld. Under the park's rustic gazebos, officers set up temporary stations. One by one, locals are called in, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. The officers' probing questions aim to piece together a backstory to the illicit cargo found in the lake's depths. Whispers among the crowd hint at suspicious activities witnessed in recent months. An elderly fisherman speaks of unusual nighttime boat activity. A jogger recalls a truck, often parked at odd hours. These bits of information, though seemingly unrelated, begin to weave a sinister tapestry for the investigators. In the confines of the local precinct, detectives lay out evidence from past unsolved cases. Maps, pictures, and ballistic reports clutter the tables. Slowly, a pattern emerges, indicating that the weapons in the crates might have been used in several unsolved incidents in the region. Buried within old case files, mentions of a suspected smuggling route resurface. Stacking evidence upon evidence, detectives start to piece together a timeline, suggesting that the park's lake was a drop-off point. But the enormity of the operation, the weapons, and the sheer audacity of using such a public place hint at powerful players behind the scenes. A decision is made to keep media and public attention focused on Mark and Kyla's heroics, using it as a smokescreen. In the background, plainclothes officers keep watch, hoping to catch the culprits returning to retrieve their submerged arsenal. Undercover agents infiltrate known criminal networks, trying to gather actionable intelligence. Rumours spread throughout the community like wildfire. Whispered conversations at grocery stores, schools, and coffee shops revolve around the mysterious crates. Parents hold their children a little tighter, and late-night walks become less frequent. The idyllic community, once untouched by such concerns, now experiences the suffocating grip of fear and anticipation. Late one evening, a junior detective stumbles upon a wiretap recording. A voice, masked but discernible, speaks of a retrieval plan.
There is a costume. We must get one crate from the place.
Dates, times, and code names are mentioned, pointing to an imminent rendezvous at the lake. The discovery electrifies the precinct, setting the stage for a potential showdown. With night cloaking their movements, tactical units stealthily surround a warehouse, previously identified as the prime suspect's hideout. Spotlights stay dimmed, and radios buzz with hushed urgency.
Be advised, suspect is armed and extremely dangerous.
On a whispered command, officers breach the entrance, clearing room after room, their weapons at the ready and eyes sharp. Inside the warehouse, amid stacks of crates similar to those found underwater, Mark and Kyla, working with the police, pose as buyers. When the unsuspecting criminals present a sample, the police move in. Caught off guard, The culprits grab Kyla, using her as a shield. But Mark, with a sudden and surprising move, distracts them long enough for the officers to act.
Suspect is in custody.
After a brief scuffle, the culprits are subdued, handcuffed, and led away. The once menacing warehouse now buzzes with relief and triumph. The police celebrate the capture, knowing their community is safer. Kyla, though shaken, manages a smile, her ordeal finally at an end. The town gathers in the local square, where Mark and Kyla are hailed as heroes. Mayor speeches, commendations and applause fill the air. Residents come forward, shaking their hands, some with tears in their eyes, others with gifts of appreciation. The gratitude of the community is palpable, a stark contrast to the earlier tension and fear. Sitting on the edge of the very lake that started it all, Mark holds Kyla close. They watch as ripples dance upon the water, mirroring their earlier tumultuous journey. Mark ponders how a simple dive turned into an unforeseen adventure, grateful for Kyla's unintentional nudge towards the crates and the lucky breaks that followed.